tragedy. It is the boast of Aeschylus that there is not one of his plays which touches on this subject. I never allowed of your lewd Sthenoboias, or filthy detestable Phaedras. Not I. Indeed, I should doubt if my drama throughout exhibit an instance of woman in love. And there can be little doubt that with a Greek audience this would count to him as a merit, and that the shifting of the centre of interest by Euripides from the sterner passions of heroes and of kings to this tenderer phase of human feeling would be felt, even by those whom it charmed, to be a declension from the height of the older tragedy. And to this limitation of subject corresponds a limitation of treatment. The Greek tragedy is composed from a definite point of view, with the aim not merely to represent, but also to interpret the theme. Underlying the whole construction of the plot, the dialogue, the reflections, the lyric interludes, is the intention to illustrate some general moral law, some common and typical problem, some fundamental truth. Of the elder dramatists, at any rate, Aeschylus and Sophocles, one may even say that it was their purpose, however imperfectly achieved, to justify the ways of God to man. To represent suffering as the punishment of sin is the constant bent of Aeschylus. To justify the law of God against the presumption of man is the central idea of Sophocles. In either case, the whole tone is essentially religious. To choose such a theme as Lear, to treat it as Shakespeare has treated it, to leave it, as it were, bleeding from 1,000 wounds, in mute and helpless entreaty for the healing that is never to be vouchsafed, this would have been repulsive, if not impossible, to a Greek tragedian. Without ever descending from concrete art to the abstractions of mere moralising, without ever attempting to substitute a verbal formula for the full and complex perception that grows out of a representation of life, the ancient dramatists were nevertheless, in the whole apprehension of their theme, determined by a more or less conscious speculative bias. The world, to them, was not merely a splendid chaos, it was a divine plan, and even in its darkest hollows, its passes most perilous and bleak, they have their hand, though doubtful perhaps and faltering, upon the clue that is to lead them up to the open sky. It is consonant with this account of the nature of Greek tragedy that it should have laid more stress upon action than upon character. The interest was centred on the universal bearing of certain acts and situations, on the light which the experience represented threw on the whole tendency and course of human life, not on the sentiments and motives of the particular personages introduced. The characters are broad and simple, not developing for the most part, but fixed, and fitted therefore to be the mediums of direct action, of simple issues, and typical situations. In the Greek tragedy, the general point of view predominates over the idiosyncrasies of particular persons. It is human nature that is represented in the broad, not this or that highly specialized variation. And what we have indicated as the general aim, the interpretation of life, is never obscured by the predominance of exceptional and, so to speak, accidental characteristics. Man is the subject of the Greek drama. The subject of the modern novel is Tom and Dick. Finally, to the realization of this general aim, the whole form of the Greek drama was admirably adapted. It consisted very largely of conversations between two persons, representing two opposed points of view, and giving occasion for an almost scientific discussion of every problem of action raised in the play. And between these conversations were inserted lyric odes in which the chorus commented on the situation, bestowed advice or warning, praise or blame, and finally summed up the moral of the whole. Through the chorus, in fact, the poet could speak in his own person, and impose upon the whole tragedy any tone which he desired. Periodically he could drop the dramatist and assume the preacher, and thus ensure that his play should be what we have seen was its recognized ideal, not merely a representation, but an interpretation of life. But this without ceasing to be a work of art. In attempting to analyze in abstract terms the general character of the Greek tragedy, we have necessarily thrown into the shade what after all was its primary and most essential aspect. An aspect, however, of which a full appreciation could only be attained not by a mere perusal of the text, but by what is, unfortunately, forever beyond our power, the witnessing of an actual representation as it was given on the Greek stage. For, from a purely aesthetic point of view, the Greek drama must be reckoned among the most perfect of art forms. End of chapter 4, section 6, part 1. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.